Welcome to Verge File.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. I remember the exact moment I disappeared from my own marriage. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming. No betrayal caught in the act. It was quieter than that, colder, like frost creeping across a window pane until you can't see out anymore. It was a Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from work, tossed my keys on the counter, and asked her a simple question. "Wanna watch that show we started?" She didn't look up, didn't blink, just kept scrolling through her phone like my voice was background noise. Then, like it was rehearsed, she said it. "I'm not your toy." 4 words. No heat, no emotion, just a sharp edge disguised as indifference. I stood there, stunned, waiting for her to elaborate. She didn't. She leaned back into the couch cushions, phone glowing in her hand, like I hadn't even spoken. She didn't say she was tired. Didn't say, maybe later. She made it clear that connection, any connection, wasn't something I had access to anymore. Not unless she decided otherwise. That was the part that hit hardest. Not the words, but the control. She knew what she was doing. She wanted me to feel small. And I did. For a second. Then something inside me shifted. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just precision. I looked at her, really looked, at the cold shoulder, the locked screen, the way her body turned slightly away from mine on the couch like I was an intruder in her space. And I realized this wasn't new. This had been happening for months. I just hadn't been ready to see it. That night, I didn't reach for her in bed. I didn't say goodnight. I stared at the ceiling while she scrolled her phone, the glow dancing across the walls like a silent witness. And in that silence, I made a decision. I was done asking. No announcements. No ultimatums. Just done. The next morning, I didn't make her coffee. I didn't ask how she slept. I didn't remind her about the package arriving or the dentist appointment I'd scheduled for her 2 weeks ago. She walked past me in the kitchen, waiting for the usual check-in, the casual affection I'd always offered. I gave her nothing. That was the first day of my quiet exit. I became polite, cordial, emotionally sterile. I did my chores, paid the bills, laughed at work when people told stories. But at home, I was a ghost wearing my own face. She didn't notice at first. Or maybe she did, but liked it. Thought she'd finally trained me out of needing attention. Maybe she thought silence meant control. But she forgot one thing. When a man stops reaching, he doesn't stay still. He detaches. And I was already gone. By the end of that week, I'd already changed. I started leaving the house earlier. Not because I had somewhere to be, but because I couldn't stand the hollow sound of our mornings anymore. Her walking into the kitchen in those oversized hoodies, glancing at me like I was a misplaced object on the counter. No good morning. No smile. Just silence. And not the kind that brings peace. The kind that buries you alive. So I beat her to the door. Sat in my car with coffee I didn't finish, letting the engine run and the heater hum while I planned my escape. Not from the house, but from her world. I didn't slam doors. Didn't leave clues. That's what she expected. That's what she would have done. I moved in shadows. Like mist slipping under the doorframe. She didn't notice the first changes. Not when I canceled that subscription she never remembered I paid for. Not when I rerouted a piece of my paycheck to a private account she couldn't access. Not when I started locking my phone, quietly mirroring the secrecy she had once weaponized. But the gym? That she noticed. "You're going out again?" she asked, the first time I picked up my keys without explanation. I nodded. She tilted her head. "With who?" "Just people." That word hit harder than I expected. Not because of what it said, but because of what it didn't. No names. No specifics. Just enough to stir the same unease she'd once left in me on endless nights with unanswered texts. I started coming home late. Not out of spite, but because I had better places to be. Spaces that didn't echo with judgment or contempt. I'd eat alone, shower without leaving the door open, sleep without waiting for her to roll in past midnight, reeking of wine and faint detachment. And still, she didn't ask. Not really. Until the night she found me folding my own laundry, separate from hers. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Her voice low. "Are we okay?" I looked up, smiled politely. Never been better. That smile rattled her more than any fight ever could. Because it wasn't fake. It wasn't bitter. It was real. I was genuinely okay. Without her. That's when the shift began. Not in me, in her. She started testing the waters. Wore perfume to bed. Asked if I wanted to join her for a movie. Even cooked once, something she hadn't done in months. I said thank you, but I never reached. And for the first time, I saw it in her eyes, doubt. She had built this tower thinking I would circle it endlessly, trying to climb back to her. But I wasn't climbing anymore. I was walking away. Quietly. Completely. And by the time she realized it, the silence wouldn't be a strategy. It would be her reality. She didn't crack all at once. That's the thing people don't understand. Falling apart looks like silence before it sounds like chaos. The first signs were subtle. One night, I came home late again. She was on the couch in that red silk robe she hadn't worn in over a year. Hair done. Wine poured. A movie paused at the opening screen, like a trap set with velvet and memory. I didn't flinch. Just set my bag down and said I'd already eaten. She blinked. Waited. Thought I'd fold. Maybe even apologize for not noticing the effort. But I didn't. I just thanked her and went upstairs. Alone. She stayed downstairs longer than usual that night. I could hear the faint flicker of the TV she wasn't really watching, the sound of a wine glass being set down too hard. That was the first fracture. The next day, she texted me during lunch. Something she hadn't done in months. Just 4 words. Hope your day's okay. I replied, all good. No emoji. No follow-up. Just flat, unshakable distance. A mirror held up to everything she'd taught me through her neglect. By the end of the week, she was dressing up for errands. Light makeup, lip gloss, tight jeans. And when I noticed, I didn't say a word. That silence. It did more damage than any insult ever could. She wanted praise. I gave her peace. She started talking more at dinner. Not real conversation, just noise. Updates about coworkers I'd never met. Stories about people I didn't care about. Trying to fill the void she used to rule. I nodded. Listened. But I didn't ask follow-up questions. I didn't lean in. I stayed exactly where I was. Mentally, emotionally, strategically. Outside the circle she had drawn for herself. That's when I started seeing the subtle panic set in. She began checking my phone charger. Asking if I needed anything when she went out. Leaving post-it notes on the fridge like we were some cheerful sitcom couple. One of them said, "Don't forget your umbrella. Storm coming." She had no idea. The storm had already passed. It passed the day I stopped needing her attention like oxygen. The day I stopped building a life around her approval. The day I realized I could function better without dragging her disinterest around like dead weight. And still, she clung to this belief that effort now would somehow reverse the decay. That a few cooked meals, a brush of the hand across the table, a compliment here and there, would rebuild what she spent years eroding. But she was learning the hardest truth of all. You don't get to decide when someone stays. You only get to decide how they leave you. And I had already chosen the quietest way possible. By becoming the man she no longer had access to. The real shift came the night I didn't come home on time, and didn't explain why. There was no affair. No detour with friends. Just the quiet decision to stop rushing back to someone who made my presence feel like an inconvenience. I took the long way home. Grabbed a burger from a diner I used to love. Ate alone, in silence, and for the first time in a long time, the silence felt peaceful, not punishing. When I finally walked through the door, the lights were low, and she was sitting on the couch, legs tucked underneath her, staring at the front door like she'd been waiting. Her eyes flicked up. I could see the questions forming behind them. She didn't ask. Not yet. But she wanted to. That's when I knew she was losing the script. She used to control the tempo, decide when we spoke, how we touched, what version of us got to breathe. But now, I was the one setting the rhythm. And my rhythm didn't need her approval. The next morning, she made breakfast. Eggs, bacon, my favorite toast. It was all laid out, plated with care. She even sat at the table, waiting for me to join. I poured myself coffee, looked at the spread, and thanked her. Then I ate standing by the window. No conversation. No performance. Just distance wrapped in politeness. It was colder than anger could ever be. That weekend, I emptied the garage. Not everything, just my side. Cleared space. Donated boxes of stuff we hadn't touched in years. Moved my tools into a new storage unit. She came out mid-afternoon, surprised to find the space half empty. Asked what I was doing. I smiled. Just reorganizing. She nodded, but I saw the flicker of realization. This wasn't a phase. This was preparation. Later that night, she checked the bank app. I knew, because I saw her expression change when she thought I wasn't looking. She scrolled, swiped, paused, then got up from the couch and walked into the kitchen. She didn't ask me anything, because she already knew. I'd rerouted my paycheck weeks ago, moved part of it into a new account under my name only. Not to hide it, not to punish her, but because I wasn't building a shared future anymore. That was the first time she didn't kiss me goodnight, not out of disinterest, but out of fear, because she could feel it now. The edge, the void she once used as a weapon, was now swallowing her whole. She had trained me to survive without her. She just didn't expect me to like it. She began to orbit me. Not openly, not like before, but subtly, lingering in doorways longer than necessary, asking surface-level questions just to hear my voice, mentioning old memories like we were still co-authors of a story that hadn't already ended in silence. I didn't ignore her. That would have been too obvious. I answered. I nodded. I even smiled. But every response was measured, distant. A polite stranger in a house that used to feel like home. She started checking things she never cared about, where I was going, what I was wearing, why I shaved more often. She asked about my gym routine, if I was meeting someone after work. Not accusatory. Curious. Desperate in disguise. I gave her nothing. Let her questions hang in the air, unanswered, until she stopped asking them out loud and started asking them in her head. That's where the real torment lives, in the imagination. That's when she started touching me again. Not romantically, tentatively. A hand on my arm as I passed by, fingers brushing mine when I handed her something. Testing. The first time, I didn't react. The second time, I stepped away slightly. Not harshly, instinctively. And I saw it. The sting. The realization that the distance wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. One night, she came into the bedroom wearing that black tank top she used to save for weekends away. No words. Just presence. The same one she'd once weaponized like power. I was brushing my teeth. I saw her in the mirror. She watched my reflection. Waited for a glance, a flicker, a pull. I spit. Rinsed. Wiped my face dry. Then walked past her like she wasn't standing there at all. That night, she didn't scroll her phone. She lay there, still, wide awake, facing me in the dark. I didn't speak. She broke the silence. I feel like I'm losing you. It was the first honest thing she'd said in months. And maybe, in another life, it would have cracked me open. But I'd already closed that door. Sealed it. Moved on from the version of myself that begged to be seen. So I gave her the only answer that still made sense. You can't lose what's already gone. She turned away, her body curling in on itself like she was suddenly cold. But I didn't move. I let her sit in that silence. Because this time, it didn't belong to her. It belonged to me. I used to brace myself when I heard her footsteps. Some part of me flinched, preparing for another cold glance, another sarcastic sigh, another moment where I'd reach and she'd retreat. But now, when she walked into the room, I didn't feel dread. I felt nothing. That was the difference. Love doesn't die in explosions. It suffocates in silence. I started spending more time outside the house, at the gym, at the park, even sitting in my car in silence just to avoid the air inside those walls. I didn't lie about where I was going. I didn't offer explanations either. She never used to ask. Now, she started noticing my absences. You've been quiet lately, she said one night, pretending like the past year hadn't been a museum of her own silence. I nodded. That was it. The next day, she tried again. She brought home takeout from my favorite place, Chinese from a little spot across town. The kind of food we used to eat during movie marathons before intimacy turned into a bargaining chip. I thanked her, ate at the kitchen counter, then went upstairs without turning on the TV. She stayed downstairs. I heard her open the wine, pour a glass, put on a playlist. Her attempt to rewind time. It didn't work. Later that night, I found her standing in the doorway of the bedroom, wine glass in hand, watching me pack a small duffel bag. Are you leaving? She asked, trying to sound calm. Not tonight. She blinked. Then what's the bag for? I zipped it shut. Readiness. She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. The next morning, I showered before dawn. Left a little earlier than usual. Dressed sharper. Sprayed cologne she once picked out. It wasn't for her. It was for me. I wanted to smell like someone who had rediscovered his own value. That week, I booked a solo weekend trip, just 2 nights. Nothing extravagant. Just away. I didn't tell her until the night before. She waited until I was brushing my teeth again. Always the mirror, always the reflection, before asking where I was going. Somewhere quiet. She didn't press, but her hand gripped the edge of the sink like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. By then, She had started texting me more often during the day. Useless things. Memes. Links to videos. Screenshots of things she used to scroll through while ignoring me. I didn't reply fast. Sometimes not at all. The distance she had once created like a moat had become her prison. And I was on the shore, watching her realize how wide it had become. One night, I caught her crying in the bathroom. She didn't know I saw, and I didn't go to her. Because love doesn't return just because someone finally misses it. Especially not when they only miss the comfort, not the connection. By the time I came back from that weekend trip, something in the house had shifted. She had cleaned, lit candles, rearranged the living room furniture just slightly, like changing the angle of the couch could change the direction we were heading. There were fresh flowers in a vase on the table, my favorite beer in the fridge, a playlist humming low in the background. It was her version of a peace offering. I walked in, set down my bag, took in the scene like an audience member, not a partner. She walked out from the kitchen wearing soft colors, not the sharp lines she'd favored during the months she treated me like an employee in her empire. I thought we could cook tonight, she said. I nodded. Sure. And we did. Quietly. Efficiently. Like co-workers assembling a project they were no longer emotionally invested in. She tried to laugh a few times. Tried to meet my eyes. But I didn't offer what she was looking for. Because I'd spent too long being invisible to suddenly act like I missed her gaze. After dinner, she suggested we sit outside. It used to be our favorite thing, just watching the sky, listening to the cicadas, feet propped on the railing. We did. But this time, the silence didn't bind us. It divided us. I leaned back. She leaned in. I've been thinking a lot, she said, as if the admission itself would earn points. About us. I waited. I know I pulled away. For a long time. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer needed closure. She reached out, her fingers brushing my arm lightly. I don't want to lose what we had. That was the moment. The pivot. The buried confession inside a vague hope. But what she didn't understand was that the version of us she wanted to return to had died in the silence she crafted. You don't neglect something for years, then ask it to bloom the moment you remember it exists. So I turned toward her, looked her in the eye, and I smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just finally. That smile said everything she hadn't listened to for months. She pulled her hand back slowly, looked away. Inside, I could feel her scrambling, internally rewriting the narrative, trying to understand how the man who once chased her warmth could now sit next to her without reaching. But I had already done my grieving. What she was feeling now, that tightness in the chest, that weight behind the ribs, that was just the echo of my old heartache. She was finally feeling what I used to feel, and I wasn't going to rescue her from it. Not anymore. The next week was a pattern of unraveling. She started acting like a version of herself I hadn't seen in years. Waking up early, making breakfast, sending midday texts with little hearts or inside jokes we hadn't used since year 2. Laughing too loud at nothing. Touching my back as she walked by like affection could be retroactive. It wasn't real. It was fear dressed up as effort. And I let it pass over me like weather. She posted a photo of us that week. An old one, from a vacation long before the silence set in. Captioned it with something vague, nostalgic. Like she was reminding people we were still a couple. Still fine. But I saw the panic in her hands when I didn't like it. Didn't comment. Didn't share. She brought home takeout again that Friday. Thai food this time. Another old favorite. I thought we could watch that show we never finished, she said, a little too hopeful. I nodded, said thanks, sat down. I ate slowly. She picked at her food and kept glancing at me between bites like I was supposed to crack and say something meaningful. I didn't. Because the moment she started treating me like I mattered again, I'd already learned I didn't need her validation to feel real. Later that night, I caught her in my office. She said she was looking for a charger, but her eyes were scanning, not for a cable, but for answers, for signs, for any clue about what I was planning. I didn't ask why she was in there. I just stared until she left. The next morning, I cleared out 2 drawers in the dresser. Left them empty. Intentional. She noticed that night. Opened one. Paused. Closed it again. She didn't ask. But she knew. On Sunday, her voice finally cracked. It was subtle. A tremor. Not in anger, but uncertainty. She asked if I still loved her. Softly. Like if she whispered it, the answer wouldn't hurt. I didn't lie. But I didn't give her comfort either. She turned away before I had to answer. And that, right there, was the beginning of her collapse. Because she realized I'd become what she used to be. Untouchable. She was still in the house, but now she was the one circling, the one hoping, the one rehearsing conversations in her head and falling apart when I didn't follow the script. And I had stopped writing scripts for her a long time ago. I was living unscripted, unattached, unbothered. By mid-month, she was unraveling by the hour. The silence I used to drown in had become hers. And now she was trying to fill it with noise, with small talk, with efforts, with desperation masquerading as routine. She started asking questions about my day, not out of care, but to gauge how far I'd drifted. If I still lived in the same emotional time zone as her. I answered truthfully, briefly, no details, no stories, just the headlines. She tried to laugh, pull at threads, but I left no loose ends to tug. She began leaving her phone face up on the counter, screen unlocked, as if transparency now could erase years of secrets. I didn't check it, not because I trusted her, but because I didn't care anymore. That's what frightened her the most. Disinterest is more terrifying than rage. One morning, she stood at the door as I grabbed my bag. Eyes glassy, mouth tight. She wanted to say something. Apologize maybe. Beg in code. But the words never came. And I didn't wait. The door closed behind me with the softest click. But to her, it must have sounded like a final verdict. At night, she lingered longer in bed, reaching subtly under the sheets like she was trying to rebuild touch without permission. I didn't move away, but I didn't move toward her either. I wasn't punishing her. I was done needing her. And she was starting to feel the chill of that truth settle into her bones. One afternoon, I came home early and found her in the closet, sorting through drawers she hadn't touched in months. Rearranging, touching old photos. She turned quickly when she saw me. I was just cleaning. I nodded, walked past. She didn't follow. That night, she cooked again. Sat across from me at the table with perfect posture and hopeful eyes. She asked if I wanted to go away for the weekend, just the two of us. Somewhere quiet. I looked at her. The woman who once made me feel like I was too much, then not enough. Who turned affection into currency and connection into a rationed resource. And I said, I've already booked a trip. Alone. She didn't eat after that. The plate sat untouched. She stayed at the table long after I cleared mine, staring at the flickering candle between us like it held the answers she refused to hear from my mouth. I went to bed alone. Slept soundly. Woke early. She was still there the next morning, sitting in the same spot. Not because she was waiting, but because she didn't know where to go anymore. And for the first time in years, that wasn't my problem to solve. The last day came quietly. No explosion. No suitcase at the door. No dramatic final speech. Just routine, almost mechanical. I woke up, showered, dressed in the clothes I'd laid out the night before. She was already in the kitchen, nursing a mug she hadn't touched. Her eyes tracked me like a stranger passing through. She tried to speak. I could feel the words forming, but her mouth never opened. That morning, I left her a letter. Not for closure, not to explain, just to confirm what she already knew. It wasn't long. No accusations. No pleas. Just a truth wrapped in clarity. I had loved her. Deeply. Fully. Even when she withheld. Even when she turned me into an accessory in my own marriage. I had waited. Reached. Tried. But the man she now wanted to hold no longer existed. He had died in her silence. I signed it with my name, first and last. Because I wasn't hers anymore. When I walked out, she was still in the kitchen. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. That was the difference. I used to walk out hoping she'd call my name. Now, I walked out hoping she wouldn't. And she didn't. The next few days passed in muted echoes. I stayed in a short-term rental I'd already scoped weeks ago. Clean, simple, anonymous. A space where her scent couldn't reach me. No photos. No leftovers. No reminders of the man I used to be. I closed the joint accounts. Finalized the new mailing address. Called the lawyer. Everything had been moving in this direction long before she noticed. That was always the point. A week later, she sent a message. No subject. No greeting. Just a single line. Can we talk? I didn't reply. A few days after that. I miss you. I let the message sit. Unread. Unanswered. Exactly like she had once let me sit in our own living room while she stared at her screen and pretended I didn't exist. Poetic, really. One night, I scrolled back to the very first photo we'd ever taken together. Young, reckless, hopeful. I looked into my own eyes in that picture, and I barely recognized the man. He was still searching. Still hoping. Still begging to be seen. I closed the photo and deleted it. Not in anger. In acceptance. Because the final goodbye isn't loud. It isn't a door slamming or a shouted curse. It's a man waking up in a room that finally feels like peace and realizing he no longer needs to be rescued. And if she ever wonders what happened to the version of me that used to crave her love, she'll find her answer in the quiet. The kind that follows when a man learns the most dangerous thing he can ever do is stop waiting. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgiven.